project. This project will be on the civil rights. I decided to do a podcast. Thought it would be pretty cool to do, especially the way how podcasts are trending in today's age. So I also wanted to give you a brief introduction of how I got here today. I was originally born in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I ended up going from Virginia to California because I joined the military. I joined the United States Marine Corps. I've done deployments. I've been in the Marine Corps about 5 to 6 years. I then got out around last year, February time frame, and transitioned into the Navy Reserves. I have aspirations to be an officer, hence why I'm here at HAC to get my degree and later commission in as an officer to keep serving my country. Now you know a little bit about me. Let's know a little bit about the project. So the first thing I'll be going over is basic African American history in the United States. Then I'll also be going into the civil rights portion of it, and then how everything affects us today as far as the African American community and the push for civil rights in today's age. So with that being said, I also want to give a big shout out to some of my favorite authors and books, and that correlates to what we got going on here. Is Half of America is a great book about how a soldier in World War II come back from actually serving their country and have to deal with some of the racial things that was happening in America. So my next book I want to show you, this is no surprise, is Malcolm X. So this book here is called The Dead Are Rising. I haven't read this one yet. I've been briefly skimming through it, and I like it a lot. I'm going to read that. And then I don't know if you know Candace Owens Blackout. I love Candace Owens. If you don't know her, you should follow her, get to know her. Candace Owens is great. So let's get right into it. So let's get right into the American Government Podcast. All right. So with that being said, we're doing civil rights, and let's hop right into, pretty much the beginning of civil rights and leading up to it. So before civil rights, right, of course, we had slavery. African Americans were enslaved for, 400 years, over 400 years. And later on, we start to, gain some rights, start being recognized as actual citizens rather than property to other Americans or white Americans, right? With that being said, the mindset of a lot of Americans or African Americans still didn't change. So this mindset of them being property and looked at as a second-class citizen, carried on for a very long time. And that's because, for the most part, when you grow up and you know that the stove is hot, this is this, that is that, this is how I tie my shoes, this is how I do that, and it's kind of hard to break those habits. So for a long time, African Americans were treated harsh. And even after slavery, sometimes in some areas, African Americans were still enslaved. So it really didn't change until later on. And then even women, they didn't get rights even when, African American males did get rights. So, even the push for, women's suffrage in America, that happened, but it didn't happen for the African American women. So if you really think about it all, African American women were treated, the worst out of probably anybody in America during this time. So big shout out to African American women because they've came from a really bad situation years ago, and I'm so happy to see African American women winning today. So big shout out to African American women. So this then leads into the Harlem Renaissance era. So the Harlem Renaissance era is very important because it's kind of on the break of starting this the civil rights movement, not the Civil War movement, but the civil rights movement. Harlem Renaissance was very important because we got artists like Langston Hughes, Duke Ellington, Nora Neale Hurston, which I'm doing my project on in my English class. So these were the first African Americans that were actually like on TV. You got also Billie Holiday that sung Strange Fruit. If you haven't listened to Strange Fruit, I recommend you listen to that very powerful song, very meaningful song. It's actually in that blues jazz era. And if you guys don't know, blues is basically came from slaves singing on plantations and communicating. It's coming from like a dark, passionate place. So the Harlem Renaissance era kind of enhanced all of that and brought it out to forefront America and actually started giving us a voice to be able to articulate and express ourselves to America through art. That's why if you look in today's America, we have so many artists and so many young African American kids wanting to grow up to be an artist, to be able to express themselves and not really be judged, because for the most part, art is a safe place and it's meant for the world, or if it's meant for yourself, sometimes it's meant for yourself. But for the most part, when you put out art, you want the world to see it, and they usually have their own opinions and stuff about it, but it's usually a safe place for artists to express themselves. So that, kind of helped us as far as the civil rights movement. So as we get into the civil rights movement, African Americans started to say like, hey, enough's enough, and we're not, putting up with this anymore. So you got Dr. Martin Luther King, who was the leader of this, revolution and change, and he done a lot of stuff. And it's not just him that I want to talk about. I also want to talk about, the other people, the college students. I feel like college students and other African Americans, played a really great part by following African American leaders, by doing the sit-ins, which didn't go so well, but however, the impact that it made across America, speak volumes. So those were amazing. I had people like Rosa Parks, who got on the bus and, refused to move from her seat, kind of to prove a point, like, hey, like I can sit anywhere. I worked as hard as you guys did all day. And, she kind of helped that movement out. And Dr. Martin Luther King was pretty much the face, the voice, and the passion behind all of it, which is amazing. I also want to get into Malcolm X, which I showed you guys a book earlier about Malcolm X. Malcolm X was kind of the opposite of Martin Luther King. So when Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were kind of going at the same time, however, Martin Luther King passed away, and then he was assassinated, and Malcolm X took over. And once Malcolm X kind of took over as the iconic leader for African Americans or the civil rights movement, this is when you had the rise of the Black Panthers and things like that. And Martin Luther King thing was like, peaceful protest and keeping everything as peaceful as possible. Whereas Malcolm X was like, hey, it's an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. If they do something bad to us, we should be able to do something bad to them. And he wasn't promoting violence, for instance. He was promoting protection. And during the time where, little girls and little boys would go to church, and they would get bombed, just because of the color of their skin. This is very emotional, actually, to talk about this on camera, but hey, just because of the color of their skin, man. And I can get why, Malcolm X led that. It's like, hey, Martin Luther King wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for us. That peaceful protest didn't work. It actually did work, but we'll find that later on. But at that very moment, a lot of African Americans were really upset. Some African Americans lost hope. And then when Malcolm X, came in and really took over those feelings and ran with them, and it really made him more powerful than anything because of what happened with Martin Luther King. His backing with a lot of African Americans that were really sad about what happened to Dr. Luther King, they followed behind him and wanted to do something about it. They wanted it to change. And this is where, we started getting that push for segregation instead of integration. So, things like where in Little Rock, Arkansas, where, they start integrating the schools and things like that, which is crazy to think that they had to, call the Army and the Coastal Guard down there just for those kids to go to school, because without the military being there, man, like the kids probably would have had a really, really hard time going to school. And I'm pretty sure they did. You can see videos and things like that. These kids, children, being called names and being stuff getting thrown at them and getting beat up. But, it seems like every, single chance and time they got, they just kept pushing and kept pushing and kept pushing, which I think is crazy. And it's really amazing, the resiliency during this time that African Americans had. So let's make a pivot from African American resiliency and let's get into some of the closing thoughts. So Americans today are in a better space because of the civil rights movement. I think we all have learned something somewhere down the line because of the civil rights movement. And African Americans are going to keep pushing. The NAACP is going to keep pushing for equality and justice. We just had recent events where, as in, the George Floyd, I know a few years ago we had Trayvon Martin incidents. A lot of these things have been more so police brutality and things of this nature. But in every other realm of this country, civil rights is still being pushed forward. So thank you for, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and those leaders for, making it the effort to push that so I can live and a lot of other African Americans live the way we do today. And with that being said, we also have something that is going on with our governor, where he believes that, African American history should not be taught in college, should not be taught in, schools, period. So, at least in the state of Florida. So, how do you feel? I'm asking you, my professor, as we would do on our discussion board, how do you feel about the African American history curriculum being taken out of the schools in Florida? And that'll be my closing question. I'll also have a few photos from the Civil Rights Movement, and I will be playing the Billie Holiday Strange Fruit song. So tune in.
Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth,